Good afternoon. This presentation will be covering edTPA and various resources that teaching candidates can access in order to do well on the test. edTPA is a performance-based assessment that teacher candidates at NC State must complete in order to complete the program. This is not only an NC State requirement, this is an assessment that's required by almost all of the states in America. It's consisting of 3 tasks. 1 is planning, 2 is instruction, and 3 is assessment. You'll notice that these tasks reflect a basic cycle of instruction that you would be using in the teaching field. So this means that it is a very effective way for teachers to be assessed before they complete their program. It does require a lot of time and effort from the student's part, but there are many resources available for you, and that's what I'm going to go over in this presentation. Something you ought to know before going into this, because many students become very nervous when they see edTPA because they've heard of how daunting it is in the way of time. It is not like a multiple choice test that you can take. It is not a paper. This is something that requires writing and self-evaluation and recording of yourself teaching. So it's various components, but to motivate you, you should remember about how valuable it is in regards to your profession. You're being able to recall everything that you've learned from your classes and your program and apply them. Concepts such as creating a student-centered classroom, collaborative classrooms, respectful classrooms. You can now integrate these into the lesson plans you write and the lessons that you teach and the assessments that you give. And after you've done that, you get feedback from the exam scorers that give you an idea of how well you perform when you go into your field. So not only is it helpful for you, but it is also our duty as public instructors to adhere to professional standards. In these phases of the instruction cycle, planning, instruction, and assessment, all of these are engaging the professional teaching standards that we've been learning about in our program. This is a way for us to demonstrate that we understand and can carry out all of these standards. It is our duty as public instructors to be able to be assessed in an aligned way and show that we are qualified to teach the next generation of students. So, before you begin planning your edTPA, your lessons, these are some ideas that you can do to begin once you are starting to be placed into your student teaching. You can go online and familiarize yourself with the edTPA process. There's an edTPA handbook available to download for free online, and there are various instruction commentaries that you can find. Because this is such a widely used assessment, there are many resources available for free online. As you know, planning and instruction and assessment that's not something that's going to happen in 1 week. This is a very time-consuming process. So you ought to begin organizing yourself. And once you begin getting placed into your student teaching, the sooner that you can talk to your coordinating teacher, the better. So, something that will probably encourage you as you're learning about the edTPA assessment is that you have the freedom to create your own lessons and present yourself to a class of students and assess the students yourself. All of what you're being assessed on is your own work. This is not the coordinating teacher's work, it is yours. You will be coordinating with that teacher, and it is best that you align what you're doing with what the students are already doing, but you get that freedom to demonstrate what you've learned in your program through this assessment. Not only that, but the edTPA is designed to help you succeed. You have various resources available online, such as the handbook, such as different websites and videos, but your NC State instructors are also going to be a valuable resource for you. And the edTPA is set up in a way so that it's very accessible. Each task is explained very thoroughly in the instructions, and you get 15 separate rubrics. Now, 15 rubrics sounds like a lot, but there are 5 for each section. 5 for planning, 5 rubrics for instruction, and 5 rubrics for assessment. And each of these rubrics break down specifically what the scorers want to see. So you can very clearly see in writing what each score entails for each rubric. So it's very detailed. You can't miss exactly what they want. So just look at the rubrics and do what they say. The handbook is going to be a very valuable resource for you. You can see from this example, from the contents of the handbook, that it's very thorough. Now I'm going to go over each step of the edTPA. Task 1 is planning, as I mentioned before. And what you're going to be doing first, once you've been placed into your student teaching, is you're going to fill out a context for learning document. That document is going to answer questions about the school you'll be teaching at and the type of students you'll have in your classroom. Now, you won't be able to fill this out until you get your placement, and once you're able to talk to your coordinating teacher about the students. So you can begin lesson planning first, but I wouldn't go into a lot of detail until you know your students. In these lesson plans that you write, you need to ask yourself some of these questions outlined on the right, such as, what are my students' needs? How, what supports will they need? So there's only so much lesson planning you can do before you know the context for learning. Once you've written your lesson plans and they're very clearly aligned to the standards you're teaching, you'll need to be writing a commentary explaining the plans and how they align and why they're going to be effective for the students that you have specifically. Task 2 is where you're recording yourself teaching and implementing the plans that you've written up. It is recommended that you record everything that you do in your student teaching. However, you're not going to be submitting all of that. In a couple of slides, you'll see the actual requirements for each program of the teaching program. But again, recording everything you do is very useful, especially because you'll have a large pool of information to pull from. As stated previously, there are many rubrics that are provided so you can see exactly what they want. So something that you need to understand is that in the video clips that you submit for edTPA, you're not providing a narrative of a learning segment. They don't need to see a beginning and an end necessarily. All you need to show is that you're demonstrating a positive classroom environment, you're showing the students are engaged in learning, and you're showing that you're connecting to your content and everything specified in the handbook for your content area. So remember that they only need that segment that shows what's in the rubric. They don't need to see necessarily a whole lesson. So when you're going to select your video, make sure that you select videos that you can specifically reference in your commentary how you're demonstrating the items in the rubric. Make sure that you also include timestamps. That way the scorers don't have to look for what you're talking about. Put a timestamp for every piece of evidence you give for proof that you're adhering to the rubric, and you should get a full score. Please remember not to share the video publicly on YouTube, Facebook, or anything else. Even though students will be signing consent forms, it is not acceptable for you to be posting them publicly. Also, another reason to submit or to record everything that you do as a student teacher is that you can choose videos that not only show you performing according to the rubric, but don't have any embarrassing slip-ups, such as poor classroom management or maybe a content error that you've made a mistake on. Here are the requirements for the different programs in the teaching field. How many minutes that you need to submit, how many clips you need to submit. You'll notice that none of them are more than 20 minutes. So if you record all of your student teaching, you'll be able to have a lot to go through in order to pick which 20 minutes of your teaching are going to best demonstrate what's in the rubric and also show the students performing at their best. The final task for edTPA is the assessment of student learning. In task 1, you should have already decided how you're going to assess the student learning, but in task 3, this is where you're going to submit the student work, show the feedback that you've given them, and reflect on how that's going to help you with future decisions if you were to continue teaching that class. You should at least submit 3 student samples, and remember that at least one of these students should have specific learning needs. Once you've selected the 3 student samples, make sure that you also include the feedback that you have given that student, and then you're going to be writing a commentary on the assessment that you gave the class, and I'm going to detail that in the next slide. The commentary should include the following. 1, you should analyze the student learning patterns for your whole class. Even though you're submitting only 3 student samples, your commentary should talk about the patterns you saw throughout the whole class. Also, you should talk about how the feedback you gave the 3 specific students is going to help them specifically, and it's addressing their strengths and their needs. Also, you should show evidence of language understanding and use. And finally, the last part of your written part is that you should explain how what you saw in the assessment of the students will help you make future decisions, if you were to continue with that class, on that class, the 3 focus students specifically, and other individuals and groups. One very important thing to remember when writing is that you should support your explanation with principles from research and or theory. You'll get a lot of ideas for this in some of your NC State classes. But this is a part of the rubric, so please do not forget it. Finally, here are a few tips to remember. When you're writing, especially if you're an English major, you're tempted to make it sound really pretty and really beautiful, but this is not the time for that. This is technical writing, so the closest your language matches the edTPA rubrics, the more likely you'll get a better score. So be concise, be specific, and use the language in the rubrics. Also, this is a lot of work that you'll be doing, but only one deadline. So consider creating your own personal deadlines so that you don't fall behind or become overwhelmed. Remember also not to isolate yourself. You have several instructors at NC State that are more than willing to help you. NC State has a very high success rate for edTPA, and that's because we have such supportive instructors. Please take advantage of that. Also, talk a lot with your cooperative teacher. Some CTs will be very open to a lot of discussion, and some might not be as open, but all of them should have some discussion with you and give you feedback on how to better engage the specific students you have, because they see them right with you. Also, remember to check information and tips on NC State's edTPA website. It's updated frequently, so keep looking at it. And finally, there are PGU sessions that NC State offers for every semester that give you further guidance and assistance in edTPA. So look at the NC State's edTPA website in order to sign up for those. I hope that this presentation has been helpful for you, and good luck on edTPA.